Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nested Healing Podcast. I am your host, Jess, and today we're talking about the topic of safety, especially in the regards of trauma. We have three wonderful guests with us. We have Leanne Whitson, we have Amanda Cortez, and Jen Evans. Would you guys all like to introduce yourselves? How about we start with Leanne?
Hi, my name is Leanne, and I am a graduate of the repair program. And Jen is and was my coach. We worked one-on-one, and I became comfortable with the process of the invitation of learning practices that really gave me a different way of seeing the world, and it's carried through over a year now. When the repair session came up about 6 months into our coaching relationship, she encouraged me, and I've never had a one-on-one. I had never been in a group setting where I shared anything about myself on a personal level, and you know, just that whole idea of being with other folks in a place that could be vulnerable and safety is always something you think about. But she helped me with this, and through repair, I'm so much more comfortable speaking with people, being in a group, being able to be myself and feel safe, which is really important. And I'm really thrilled to also now be working as a Zoom host. And so I'm really thrilled to be Zoom hosting with the repair program. It's not in the second or third iteration. We're about halfway through, and time's flying, and it's just a beautiful thing to see people just find their voice and the energy and excitement, and I feel it too. I'm happy to be here.
So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
All right, Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Amanda Cortez. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and Oregon. I reside in Oregon. I have a practice called Yes to Therapy in California, in 3 physical locations: Santa Cruz, Campbell, San Jose, and a location here in Oregon. I also teach at Weiser, and that's where I met Jennifer. And alongside of that, I just opted into their a doctorate program. So I'm doing that as well. And I run a small nonprofit called the STU, which is predominantly for individuals who would like to see change happen for themselves or in their communities through empowerment. And that's pretty fun as well. When I am not working, I hang out with my dogs. I kind of nerd out and read a bunch of psychotherapy books and just kind of keeping up to course with things. One thing I did not mention is the LMFT. My specific focus is with trauma survivors. So I integrate internal family systems and brain spotting. And I also serve on CAMP's chapter on their board as a treasurer position and currently president-elect. So that's me. I keep pretty busy. I think that it's really important that we talk about trauma in different intersections. The word trauma can be so broad, and I think that it's really helpful to kind of fine tune and look at the term. So thank you for having me here with you and being able to just share what I know and learn from the 3 of you as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, and congrats on working on getting your doctorate. It's a big thing coming up, but I want to say congrats to you. You're brave. Um, Alrighty, Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So I'm Jen. I'm the founder of Nested Integral Coaching Constellation and also a coach in our repair program. I'm so thrilled to be here with the 3 of you to be able to talk about this topic. I'm also a student and getting a master's in psychology, on the track to become an LMFT as well. And yeah, absolutely love being able to be in conversation with Amanda with schoolwork and coursework, and Leanne with repair and all that we're up to there, and Jess with everything we do with the podcast and other internship things and, personal life and all of that. So I'm feeling all of that to say I'm feeling so safe to be in this conversation right now. So that really fits with the theme of safety. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And also congrats to you for working on getting your master's. Gotta get there. All that fun stuff. Anyhow, so I guess moving forward with our topic, since our topic is safety in relation to trauma. I guess I wanted to start with the question, which is, what is safety to you? Like, what is safety in terms of relation to trauma to you? I'll open the floor to you guys. So whoever wants to go first.
I can jump in here. It's such a great question. There's so many different types of safety that I've become aware of in my own experience with trauma and with healing. I think overarchingly, I would say safety in my nervous system, like quite literally feeling safe in my body is a huge piece of it in all the variations. But I've noticed that there's different types of safety that I've lost due to trauma and then found and recovered in healing. Things like feeling safe in the world, quite literally, or safe in relationship with others, or even just feeling safe alone in my room in my own body with my thoughts and feelings that are coming up. Those are all different levels of safety that I was disconnected from due to some traumatic experiences and that I've reconnected to in a healing process.
Thank you for sharing that, Jen. I could, in listening to what you were sharing, something that I also thought about is when I think of safety, I think of the mind-body connection, and I also think of where we're at, or me as an individual, how my cortisol really affects me, my stress level. And when I am at a place where I'm either highly stressed or I have a higher cortisol level, I tend to revert back, and I need to, grounding is so important to me. I grew up with childhood trauma, and so I've worked so hard to get to where I am today. And so it's so important that I follow steps that are safe for me, whether that being around people who are safe for me in relationships, right? That's a big one for me relationally, trusting myself that I can keep myself safe. And it's such a big topic that I think it's so important that we're talking about it today. But the biggest thing that comes up for me is that mind-body connection, and also just going inward and finding our cortisol levels and just kind of checking in. I'll talk more about it, but yeah.
Yeah, safety to me in relation to trauma is kind of grounding is a word, but finding a space where I really can inward. I'm realizing nowadays that, yeah, I like being by myself. I hate to say that I love people, but I for years and years thought I needed someone to save me. And in the last few years, I realized I can save myself. But besides that, I can make my own environment safe. I have control of my own environment, and realize that, and realize I can do it on my own. And if other things happen, that's wonderful, but I have that within. And that's taken a long time. And as far as I think safety is just such a basic need. You know, it's a safe home, having food, it's such a basic need. So basic that we don't even think about it anymore, or we tend to not think about it. But I think Nana's right about mind-body connection. It has to do with understanding your environment and how your body is affected by your environment. The autonomic nervous system, especially, I think about and thinking about one thing that Jen had said. I know one time I was upset, and she said, Leanne, you know, sometimes it's when you're upset, or, you know, when you're not feeling safe, or when you're in conflict, or when you're upset, whatever it is, you shouldn't try to make a decision. You shouldn't try to you shouldn't try to make decisions, and just, it's a time that you should just not even take a step back, take a step back. And I found that that's been helpful for me to pull back from the situation I'm in and realize I don't have to say something that I'm gonna regret later. I can find myself safe within me.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Kind of bounce off of that, kind of what all of you are kind of saying. In my mind, it allows me to kind of think about, for me, what does safety mean for me? And in the silliest, most interesting way, because I'm a very visual, very metaphorical kind of person. That's kind of how I am. I'm a little bit more of the creative Looney type. I think of a pillow fort, and sitting inside like a pillow fort, like especially when you're a kid, and like whether you have a lamp or not, it's just you're by yourself. It's cold. The sound's a little bit dampened, and you're like, I'm one with myself, and it allows myself to have it. For me, when I'm not feeling safe and I'm on alert, I feel like, for me, it's my vagus nerve is really what goes off. It's probably like the nerve for me that goes off the most. I feel like that I can recognize, or that, because I feel like I'm very much at the beginning of my healing journey, that I feel like I can recognize the best. So I think for me is like just being able to like sit and just be like, feel it, has helped me bring myself back to safety. And so for me, I think being just in my body by myself, kind of chilling, maybe even in a dark room, sometimes that helps a lot for me.
You know, one thing I also, thank you for sharing, Leah and Jess, that came to my mind. Another thing about safety is my own ability to trust my check-ins, right? That trust and that safety there, knowing that when I check in with myself and I'm checking in, I can trust that, and I am safe enough of a person with my thoughts, my patterns, to know that I've grown. And for me, that also brings a sense of that connection between safety, trauma, and trust too. So that popped up for me too, as you were mentioning checking in, right? And grounding. I was like, well, over the years, as I've done more and more of that, it's like trusting that I am safe enough when I check in. Yeah. That I can bring myself to a safe place.
I just want to mention, Amanda, you made me think about this idea of trust. I think experiencing trauma at any point in your life and moving through it to a more healing place, you realize that trust is, for me, I've lost trust in people. I'm surprised when people are nice, just for being nice, without an agenda. So the idea of trusting other people, trusting that what you're saying to yourself is valid too, and it's okay, and it's actually helpful to understand and listen to yourself and honor that versus judge. So I love that what you said about trust, because that's a big deal.
I guess for me, to kind of like bounce off that note too, is like, I think like the thought process of trauma, because it like mentioned before, is it's so broad, and I think people kind of want to say they want to minimize their own in a way, so it kind of creates like transactional relationships between people, or at least from my point of view, my trauma has always been almost transactional, where people don't want to be compassionate. They want something in the end. And I feel like that's something that we're kind of used to. So when we get to a point where we are starting to our journey and we're starting to explore a space of safety and expand a space of safety, I think it can be hard to understand that there is compassion, and compassion is giving, and it can also be giving without receiving. And I think a lot of people struggle with that concept, and it can create distrust in that kind of way.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jess. Like in thinking about people and when someone is nice, it's what is their agenda, right? It's like, can I trust that? And this element of walking into situations or even individuals that have a history of trauma and how do we as individuals, and I know everybody's different in how their treatment is, but how do we as individuals trust the world again so we feel safe, right? And maybe it's not trusting the world as a whole, but finding our safe places and our safe people. One thing that I also thought of, like in thinking of safety, for me, one thing I thought of is feeling like this idea that safety is also a privilege. And right, like I was thinking as you were talking, Leah, about physically being safe and in my room and my house and having my husband here and my 3 dogs, and then the option to lock my windows or have options to I'm privileged enough where I can have an alarm in the front of the, like, things of that thing that I think that I don't always think about, how that's also a privilege to feel safe in some ways, where growing up I never had any of those options, right? And in this element of growing up at where I grew up anyway, you didn't call the police when you heard noises because that could be even worse for you in your situation. So now looking forward of wow, like having safety is also a privilege, right? Or getting mental health care, access to mental health care is also for so long been a privilege for people too. To even get to that place where they can work on integrating safety internally and externally too for healing purposes. So I know that might be a tangent, but that's something else that popped up for me when I thought of safety.
Good point. It is a privilege. And to bring in another point, I also think it's like a prerequisite to healing, which makes me feel really like it's pulling at my heart that it's a privilege, and also I think it's also true that it's a prerequisite, that not everybody has access, and that if we can't find access to external safety in our environment or mental health resources to help us find safety within ourselves, that we can't heal, we can't recover. Those things are really necessary ingredients. I think for me, finding a sense of personal safety within myself, before I can even have safety in relationship with others or in the world. That's something that I worked one-on-one with my own coach with for a while, to be able to just find that anchor within myself, to be able to regulate in any kind of skillful way. And it's actually now the first thought and the first instinct that comes to my mind when I do find myself triggered or dysregulated is like, how can I turn inward and regulate myself and connect to myself and prioritize feeling safe again, calming my nervous system, like really breathing, right? Connecting to all of that. And I think it's a privilege and a luxury to be able to have the tools and resources to do that. And that before I had any of those resources, instead I would just act from that particular state of dysregulation or trigger. I caused a lot of havoc doing that. I really amplified the trauma by creating more trauma by acting from those places when that was all that I was capable of. Yeah.
That made me think of something. I don't know if it's okay to share a clinical perspective. But one thing I think of is sitting as a therapist, and when you're building this relationship with your client and you're assessing and it's so important to integrate in safety, trust, because that's going to help the healing process and treatment. And I was thinking about when I used to work at a crisis unit and also a mobile crisis team, where we'd go out into the field to assess individuals for safety risk assessments. And you have a short amount of time, you have maybe 30 or 40 minutes to really build this therapeutic alliance. You intervene and you're building safety as quickly as you can, but you also know that at the end of this assessment, you're going to either send them to the hospital for further evaluation, or they're going to stay home in your safety planning. And I think about it from this clinical lens of how do you build safety as quickly as possible, but also without re-traumatizing somebody in the process. So I think it's also important for anybody listening or watching this podcast to really think about that too, if they're on the clinical side of things, is like not re-traumatizing somebody. Or even just if you're not a clinician, stepping into this world and how to not re-traumatize ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, or why my thought coming off of that is like, yeah, the re-traumatizing the self. I feel like in my healing journey a lot, especially when I was I'm doing talk therapy, but I was trying to do it on my own a lot too, without having a complete support network, because it does take a support network, I feel like, to create safety, to create healing. Um, I re-traumatized myself a lot because I was just so desperate, I feel like, to try to be better and feel better. And I think once again, to kind of Leanne's point of like, sometimes it is better to be by yourself, but sometimes we need to let people help. Like you made that point earlier. Um, and like how you can create a safety net, and like the idea of having a safety net and having people be that safety net. In one of my classes, we had one of my professors, she gave us a piece of paper and it was like a circle with a whole bunch of circles around it. And it was like 2 or 3 layers around one. And it's like you write your name in the middle. And she was like, okay, obviously you're gonna have your one go-to person, but who else is in your net? Just who else is in your safety net? Who else is there to support you? Whether it be friends or families. Who do you feel like is in the closer circle, farther circle? And for me, I thought that was really interesting and really cool and a good idea to like use, even to like just represent a safety net, and such an interesting way to give to students who don't necessarily always like go after seeking mental health care, as it is expensive and, like we said before, is a privilege to have.
Hmm. On the flip side of that, I had a therapist about 6 months ago who kind of didn't give me that exercise, but kind of like, who's your close network? And I made me, in my sense, because I'm in this place, I'm learning, everyone's in a journey, but I'm just really, yeah. Anyway, so it traumatized me because it made me think, oh my God, I couldn't tell my sister any of this. I could, wow, who could I talk? I mean, it's so interesting to your point, like how, as someone that's experienced trauma, it feels like they have no one to go to. Sometimes that might be really challenging, like I felt, and this was just 6 months ago, made me realize, wow, I don't have anybody. And it wasn't endearing to have me want to speak to that therapist and say, here, you could be my support either. So I thought that was it. I just want to put it out. And I could say kudos to Jen. I love Jen, but how her approach, and she, I was able to trust her because it was an invitation. This whole idea of you don't have to, this is an invitation. And it's not like a point blank. And I understand, Jess, your situation with school, and it's a different, but I'm just saying, I'm thinking about someone maybe watching this who is experiencing trauma and trying to find folks that can support them. Sometimes if you approach someone as an invitation, as that we're here, and here's tangible things, but you don't have to, instead of, well, do you have, so anyway, that's just my point. I would love to hear a little bit more from you, Jen, about that whole invitational side of like integral coaching, because I find it really fascinating. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Well, I can start with a little anecdote of when I was a client in integral coaching before I became a coach myself. A few years back, I was in a really difficult period of my life, coming out of multiple different intersecting traumas. It's a very intense period of work when I first started working with my own coach, and it was not quick for me to be able to find safety and trust in that relationship. As awesome as he is, I had a lot of my own reservations and withdrawal and trust issues. I also, of course, had a lot of willingness and a lot of dedication to showing up and really wanted to heal. And it was slow for me to come around. And I remember it was probably somewhere around like maybe month 2 or so. It wasn't like our first or second session. It was quite a few sessions in. And he continued to extend different invitations. Everything was invitational, right? And I remember answering one of these invitations in a way that was like, well, my thought process was coming out loud. It was like, well, I think so. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm considering it. Yeah, I think I'll try that. And it was just an invitation to like try a practice. I forget what it was now. Let's say it was a guided meditation he was offering me, right? It's like just a very simple invitation. And there was something very patient and very open and very like accessible about that. So I think the invitational kind of style is the kind of thing that I was so slow to warm up, I think, coming out of a lot of interpersonal trauma. And I also, did not have anybody that I would have put on my safety net at that time in my life, right? And I have a huge support system now. I can think of a ton of people I'd put on my safety net now if I was invited into that activity. But back at that time, I didn't have anybody to put on there, and I still would not put many people that people would take for granted to be on their safety net, like their parents or things like that. I would not put them on my safety net, right? So it's interesting to note that like sometimes it's really slow to build a support network, right? And that patience can mean the world for someone to open up and connect, and also that sometimes the people we'd put on our support network aren't necessarily the people we may assume would be there. Sometimes I think people who have like really great relationships with their parents assume everybody does, and that isn't always true, right? Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question directly, but it reminded me of my own patience and slow to warm up, and how that invitational way of being was so important to me.
I like the choice of language too. I think the kind of psychology behind language is interesting. Because of like, it's not you could do that or you could do that, or if you want to, you can do that. It's I invite you to do this, which is like I feel like it adds a lightness to it. And I think that's really cool to me.
I think it also retains a lot of agency for the person to choose it or decline it, and either one's okay.
I kind of have another question if we want to add a question in,
Let's-
which kind of refers to kind of the more like medical kind of things that like Amanda was talking about in the beginning, kind of the more psychology, the more medically terms of like safety, which is like safety on the brain is kind of more of my question with it. It's like how neurologically it affects like the body and everything, and like how we feel when we are in an active state versus when we're not in an active state. I know that I mentioned in the beginning like what safety means to us, and we kind of went into a little bit of detail, but I wanted to kind of explore it a little bit more. Like what, not to quote the really bad 90s TV infomercials of the frying pan with the egg. But to basically be like, what do we kind of feel when our brain is on that kind of cycle of feeling the trauma response and the triggerization and all of that versus the feeling of when we're able to be kind of soothed, and what does that mean kind of chemically and everything, if you guys know Yeah.
I love this question around kind of chemicals in our brain. And I actually have on my arm, I have different chemicals. So I have like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and ADHD. Like I have all these different chemicals because I really love to learn about the chemical components, right? So if it's like when we're experiencing a chemical imbalance, right? It's either we're lacking serotonin or dopamine. And I will add that with our brain, with being or exposed to trauma or unsafe situations, we constantly our neurochemicals are out of place, right? Or we're using up our dopamine or we're using up our serotonin. And so therefore we begin to kind of lack it, and we need that to feel happy. We need that to feel a sense of excitement. And so when we're lacking any dopamine or serotonin, that's when we start to, take the antidepressants to replenish that. But over time, with constant exposure as a child or whatever part in our life to trauma or feeling unsafe, our brain cannot repair new neural pathways. So the way that I think about it with neural pathways is that in order to continue to feel safe, when we're not safe, think about this, like, I don't know, this road in your brain, it's like deplenished, right? Sorry. Oh, post it. It's like deplenished, right? And so when we're doing the idea of doing trauma work with a therapist is that they're helping you rebuild this brain. I mean, rebuild this like neural pathway in your brain to allow for you to have to reinforce positive emotions, to help us cope with stress or make good decisions. And if we don't have the space to allow our brain to heal, we kind of think about it like no one else can see it. Think of your brain, right? And if there's all these different wounds from trauma, and we're not in a place where we can feel safe, then we never really heal, right? And so trauma work is supposed to help those neural pathways heal and rebuild. Yeah, it's interesting if you ever were to look at like brain scans, you can see the brain scans of people who have depression, anxiety, substance abuse, trauma, and different parts of the brain light up more than others, depending on what that person's experiencing. Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. I can keep talking about it, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole.
That's totally fine by me, but if there's anyone who wants to jump in, go ahead. I'm 100% here and listening. I'm also very fascinated by it, but obviously I'm not very knowledgeable.
Well, and then, we have parts, right? So like we have this like limbic system, right? And when we feel threatened, or speaking of safety, when we don't feel safe, the limbic system will get activated, which creates the anxiety, right? And so imagine over time, if your limbic system is always activated, what happens, right? To the rest of the brain, the rest of your body. For example, my mom was a victim of domestic violence from my dad's side, and he was pretty physical with her. And his go-to, I mean, he hit a lot of her frontal cortex, and that did a lot to her over time. The damage, to where some of it cannot be repaired, but it affects how she lives her life today and the decisions that she makes. So it's so interesting, because that prefrontal cortex is responsible for the decision making, right, in our brain. And when you're making poor decisions, you're contributing to these feelings of disrupted, maybe relationships, or a lack of happiness, or a lack of positive experiences. So yeah, it's just really important.
I would say too, though, it's really hard when you've experienced trauma to know that you're making poor decisions
Yeah.
until after, and maybe you don't even recognize that outcome wasn't a good one because you don't know any better. So I would, and I do believe awareness is a big learning with trauma and healing, but I think that there is that I think there's this thing about the autonomic nervous system where even though we feel safe, your body, you might be feel your body, your autonomic nervous system could be feeling unsafe, and you could be, and you don't know it. I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's that state of not really knowing that you're not, you don't realize that you're walking around kind of stiff. You know, if someone looked at your silhouette from behind, you're almost, you're not limping, but your shoulders are stiff. You don't feel it, you don't know it, but it's noticeable to folks that might be looking for it. It's not obvious to anyone, but so I think that our body, it's like that whole thing, the body knows before our brain knows. Like if you're going to talk about prefrontal cortex, it's so back here in the cerebellum, right? Movement in the body, and really and it starts there, and the awareness and recognizing. I think I'm going in a circle, but the idea of kind of awareness that, oh, what I'm looking at, that you could even think of like cognitive therapy, you know, if I do this, the outcome could be this, and it could be better if I change, you know, change the input gives better output. That, and does take a degree of reasoning ability that someone in deep trauma might not have. So there, that's that awareness piece that I think is really important to get, that helps with the safety and bring the nervous system down. Does that make sense? That's my experience of it. That's how that in my learning, my personal journey of this. And the one thing about Jen was saying, you know, when you're in a state, it's not a time to be making decisions, and that's okay. And giving myself like, oh, I don't need to say I'm going to do this or that. I can say, look, let me think about it. And I've never done that because I feel like I have to make a decision. I'm under stress. I've got to do this. But no, you know what? And people don't mind if you ask for a pause or a little bit of time, or you take a breath or what have you, to kind of not react, but maybe at least if you're reacting, it's through a response of maybe a little bit of a murky place instead of like this automatic, like I have to please that person or I have to say no, or yeah, just a pause.
Thanks. I do definitely appreciate those pauses, so I'm resonating with that. I
Yeah.
think too about like not knowing the decisions we're making when we're acting from trauma, like not knowing the impact they'll have. I relate to that too. I think I used to think I was making the only choice available, I think, back when I was really immersed in trauma. And it felt like choosing between like being stuck between a rock and a hard place, you know, having to make a decision. It was not a decision in hindsight, it was a reaction. It was a fight or flight type reaction in hindsight, but sometimes acting like from that particular state instead of just getting to safety, taking an action in that state that felt like it was vital for survival sometimes caused a little more complication, right? And I do find that environmental safety and being in an actual external, like you were mentioning earlier, Amanda, like being in a safe house with safe people and animals and the ability to lock your doors and there's nobody threatening inside of your house, that makes a huge difference, obviously. But when we live in traumatic and threatening and unsafe environments, decision making is not operating in the prefrontal cortex. It's that reactive survival decision making. It's a very different type of action.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to that, Jen, is this thought of, I was thinking about, well, okay, well, what about those that perhaps are not living in and like they're not living in a trauma related environment, right? And I was thinking about people living in just chaotic homes, right? Where maybe it's not necessarily there's abuse happening in the home, but maybe there's just a lot going on, right? It's just kind of chaotic all the time, loud or unpredictable, which could be traumatic for some. But I think about that, and when you grow up in a place or you live a childhood where it's constantly unpredictable and chaotic, where then that becomes your new baseline for safety. And it relates back to this, how do you even know if you're feeling safe? How do you even know if you're making poor decisions? Because this is like your baseline for functioning. And I think about that sometimes in my childhood, the level of chaos, and then coming into this work, like then becoming into adulthood and realizing, oh, that's how I was responding because I was actively in a chaotic state, right? Internally. And I didn't have any tools to regulate, or I already thought I was regulating. Oh, that makes sense why I was okay with these boundaries being crossed, or I was okay with this kind of lifestyle because that was my baseline. I don't know if that makes sense. So I think about that in terms of safety too. And then on the flip side, families, people who come from really rigid families, right? What if there is a lot of structure, but it's very rigid and you don't have a lot of flexibility, right? That also internally creates this place of chaos, like, and it creates this place where when you go out into living on your own or college or wherever you're going or work, you then become back into a place of a non-regulated or a chaotic place because you don't know how to make decisions, right? Because you're used to very rigid black and white thinking in your home. So I was just thinking about that in terms of maybe there's, like, for those listening that didn't necessarily have any quote unquote abuse in the home that they're familiar with or they want to relate to. You could also have this place of feeling unsafe from chaos in the home and unpredictability.
Yeah, and I would say too, it's a, you know, the family unit, right? I have two older sisters, we all had the same parents, but I'm the one that experienced it as trauma. And they were older, but because I'm extra sensitive and I can't, my genes are a little different, or, my brain works a little differently. So for me, huge trauma. For them, not so much. And so, and to your point, and just to recognize that there is, like even in a family rigid or chaotic, my family growing up was very chaotic and but my sisters, who knows, we all have our own things, but when I talk about trauma or any kind of mental health, they're like, what's wrong? Like they don't know anything about that world. They haven't sought help or thought they need, maybe, and they pretty successful. They haven't been married several times and had my kind of track record with life, and so, I mean, I just to say that if someone is watching, even if your sister or your brother seems pretty okay, and you're kind of like, God, it was horrible for me. That's okay. Because we're all different. And I experienced what my sisters experienced, but I experienced it as big trauma. And it really affected me and really messed up my life. And so for people watching to not feel like, well, because some people's chaos could be somebody's happy place, right? Or somebody's, you have to kind of look at it in that way of, we could all have trauma. But I don't know, I'm just going off on a whole tangent myself. You just struck whatever, it made me start to think about that, so.
Yeah.
Good, you're good. Well, it's good. It kind of led me into what we're talking and everything. About even in a chaotic household, I think common thing that humans all kind of gather around is food. So I was thinking more about like safety around foods too. And like I heard the term of like safety foods and everything where it's like I even use it where it's like you're having either a particularly hard day or especially chaotic day or whatever is going on and you have a certain dish that like you go to. I was wondering if you guys want to explore that topic.
That's I like that you bring that up, Jess. It makes me think of nutritional psychology and this lens of eating foods that have certain, well, one, you have your comfort foods, right, that you go to when you're having a hard day, and then you have your foods that you go to when you want to, I don't know, not necessarily, but your nutritional component, your nutritional value. And I remember being very curious about that and thinking, oh, I love Cheez-Its. Like Cheez-Its are so good. And then I was like, but what am I really eating and why? And so I started paying attention to when I wanted Cheez-Its or chocolate and breads, chips, things. I love the carbs, all the carbs. And I noticed that when I was craving all of that because I was stressed out, especially in grad school or trying to, just live a life, but also having full-time job and in grad school. And that was my brain's way of signaling that they were stressed. And that was the fastest way they were going to get it. My brain was going to get its needs met through eating chips and things that were not necessarily good for me because I could feed my brain, right? Rather than taking the time to have something in it that's healthier, but also has a carb, right? So potatoes or whatever it may be or a vegetable of some sort. But I think that you bring up a good point because our brain will tell us what it needs. And our brain doesn't see a donut and is like, oh, that's a donut from Krispy Kremes. It sees everything in it. And it's like, oh, fast acting chemical, really. Like I can get what I need. My brain can get fuel, and that's the fastest way to do it. So I also started looking at nutrition as a way to really learn how I was feeling about the world and my day when I couldn't necessarily see it right in front of me, if that makes sense.
I always had this thought where, well, I have this theory that everyone had, 3 o'clock coffee break. It really isn't about the caffeine. It's about that sugar that you're putting into your coffee. It's really like a sugar, and because your body and brain are saying it's 3 o'clock. I need some energy, and it's not necessarily the caffeine. That's why maybe you might have something from Starbucks that's got lots of sugar in it, and not necessarily any caffeine. So to your point, I mean, and we crave it. It's in our environment. It's how we think of life,
It made me also think of culturally too, like food as a cultural concept and food that's like you navigate for, I was just thinking about this idea of, growing up and just learning my own patterns and diving into my own childhood history. I'm biracial, so I'm half Mexican and half white. And there were certain foods, like my mom would cook certain foods that she knew would calm my dad down or would be comfort foods, so he wouldn't be as aggressive in the home that day when he came home from work because it was so unpredictable. And I don't even knew if she realized she was doing that as a safety measure, right? So it's like integrating foods for her to stay safe and protect her kids, hoping that that would be enough for my dad to feel great or feel good because he got his comfort food.
As I think about food and safety for myself, I think that when I don't feel safe, food is the last thing on my mind. Like I will actually literally lose my appetite or sort of forget to eat due to stress, skip meals, that type of thing. And that I eat more regularly when I can keep my stress levels down. Yeah.
For me, I find I kind of do both. I will either eat as much as I can, and it tends to be cheese, like mac and cheese or a quesadilla. Quesadillas growing up were like my number one because quick and easy, folded in half. I can make it in the microwave. I can make it on the stove. Whatever I needed, just cheese. And I know certain cheeses release serotonin, I believe, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I don't know. That's a good thing. That's a good question. I actually don't know what certain cheeses release dopamine, but it's interesting.
yeah, I'm pretty sure because every single time I talk to someone about like, oh, this is my comfort food and stuff, it always incorporates cheese. I feel like cheese or chicken.
Cheese,
So,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, and you make a good, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was just gonna
go.
just throw in there that if it's like chicken, I could definitely see that as somebody's brain, like they're like needing protein, right? Especially when using your brain all day, it wants to be fed. So if they're craving chicken, that's an indication that their brain is like had been working out all day. Think about it that way, and needs some protein intake, right? But sorry, go ahead and finish. You can go
No,
ahead.
that's I don't really have much of a thought besides that.
Yeah, or like eating, I don't know, wanting cake, or your brain's like, hey, I've had a long day or I'm stressed out. Give me something that gives me serotonin, dopamine, fatty acids, give it to me. And that's the fastest way you're going to give it to me. So I want the cake, right? That's why you're like really craving that cake. But if you were to have like an apple or some fruit or an almonds, I mean, I know they're not as exciting or fun. Try that out, and you're not going to the craving won't be there for the cake. It's like when they tell individuals who have with addiction and they're trying to stop drinking, eat all the candy you want, because it's the same equivalent, the sugar, right? So it's like you could have all the sugar, and that's all your brain is really wanting, is that sugar intake, but it's taking the pathway of the alcohol versus the sugar. Yeah.
And I kind of want to distance from this topic to another topic. I was also thinking about kind of the whole thing of like safety places. Like we talk about like inside your house and everything, and I was trying to think of mine, and I was thinking of my bed. For me in particular, is my safe place. I'm a nester. My bed is my nest. It makes me feel like a little bird. I like make it how I want to. I sit in it. I like rearrange it. I'll eat food in it. I do everything I can, everything possible you'd imagine. I like to live in my bed. Um, and like thinking that like kind of just like even in bigger places, we kind of make small places of safety for ourselves. Is kind of what I was thinking about a lot, and like how it's very interesting that like there's the safety in the body, and then there's the safety in the place, and even relating back in my past and in my past traumas of like how I made those pockets of safety almost. That's kind of where I was thinking.
That's a good point. I like how you said it's your bed, right? Your safety. My mom is like that. If she listens to this podcast, she's gonna kill me, because she's like, she loves her bed. And when we come over, she's like, everyone come into my room. And she wants everybody to sit on the bed. And we're like, we don't want to be on the bed. And she could have everybody all over the bed. She just wants to hang out in the bed, which that works for her, and that's how she feels safe. Um, that's a really good question. My house feels really safe to me. Like I really like to stay in it. Granted, I live in Oregon and we're hitting rainy season, so I'm probably not going to leave my house until May. But no, I mean it feels really safe. I have my 3 dogs, right? And I was thinking about that and I was like, why do I have 3 dogs? Like, but it's a safety thing, right? Like I just like to have them around, even though they're the least protective dogs ever. It feels safe to me, and my yard, and I'm just kind of like you said, just nesting, right? And so for me, I think my house, and then inside of my house is definitely my office. Like this. I know you guys can't all see it, but this is my safe place. I definitely spend a lot of time in here. Yeah.
House is definitely my safe place too. So grateful for that. I have a very safe house now. It's just me and my girls, and it's cozy and it's decorated like we like it to be, and there's like a big relax feeling. So we like to chill. And then I think other places I tend to feel safe that I remember always felt like safe places to me, even in more traumatic and chaotic times in my life, are certain places in nature. So like being at the beach, just like standing there in the sand and watching the waves, feeling the breeze. There's something really calming and safe about being at the beach for me. Um, Forests,
Yeah.
absolutely love walking through little trails that are shaded in the forest. Um, and those places have always felt safe to me, even in the midst of the most chaotic periods of my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think I'll just put this out here, and And it's probably, in previous generations, quite frowned upon, but, I have no noise canceling earbuds. And I really love them. And when I go out, if I'll go for a walk, I hate to say it. Well, I'm in the city, so there's a lot of obtrusive noises, and that's always a thing for me. But I really do enjoy the environmental safety of controlling what I'm hearing. As crazy as that sounds, and there could be some trauma part to that, that I really have to have control over my environment. But anyway, to the point of where you feel safe. Um,
That's a really good point. Yeah. I like that you brought that up about the noise cancellation. Yeah. Having that option to kind of control what you hear, what you don't hear.
yeah, and it's just something I've done all most of my life, but then just realizing over this past year that, wow, I really do. It really helps me get through stress when I can have that control. And music is what I listen to. One other thing about safety and environment, and this is why I remember growing up, and I still do it as an adult, but more mindfully now. I'm always changing my room, rearranging, moving the paintings, getting this, not even buying new things, but rearranging. And I think that has to do with some trauma of finding that safe environment that you brought up. Redefining what I need in this moment to make myself feel safe. Because it's always indoors. It's only my house or my apartment, my room, or what have you. It's never like the office. I can go in and do my work in the office, or or outside. It is what it is. But yeah, it's just this kind of retuning on a continuous basis. But and I think that's an awareness that I do that. But that I kind of relate to trauma, and finding safety.
Yeah. Leah, you made me think of times of the day too. For a long time, I really struggled with like Sunday afternoons, and I really struggled with just like during the week, I really struggled with times of the days that were like around 4 and 5 o'clock. Those time frames really I used to struggle with a long time growing up, and I think because that there was a lot to do with like my upbringing and childhood violence and whatnot. But I mean, I could be anywhere, and just knowing the time, or just like it was like I had a physical response of like my body just knew, or it just felt uneasy, like no matter where I was. And I learned that was because of this connection, right? My brain, my body, the connection, and things that have helped me like feel safe around those time frames is implementing things that I enjoy and bringing in joy, even still, because it still comes up for me, right? There's still, I'm a work in progress, and there's still moments where it's like, okay, it's this time at 4:30, and I don't really like this part of the day. And for a long time, I couldn't connect why. I didn't know why, but even though I was safe in my home, there was some disconnection where I just didn't feel safe. So I think about that when safety and trauma, and knowing that, and understanding that, to where I can improve on that. So now I try to go running on those times, like to do something I really enjoy that also increases like dopamine and serotonin, to replace that with. So yeah, you made me think about that when you were talking about kind of the space around you. Yeah.
We were talking about the times. I was also thinking about dates. There's certain dates that come around that still make me uneasy because they're anniversaries of things that have happened.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of dates yet, but I know of friends that there are dates, right? And just big things come around in your body. There's a visceral thing that happens. And maybe that time of day thing that, um, one thing I would say about repair, I just want to throw in with Jen and my experience going from the one-on-one to repair, which I should say with the repair program, there's still one-on-one coaching embedded, which is, I think, the most magical thing, because you have the experience of the group and the learning and it's not a counseling session, right? You're learning practices and it's not positive thinking either. How to describe it, Jen? I don't know. It's like a magical thing I can't put into words, but this idea of being in a community or in community with people, experiencing things for the first time, practice or what have you, and then talking about how it felt to you. There's just something magical about that feeling of the community. But anyway, but I did want to just say that that idea, I love about repair was that you had the experience, but then I could go back and talk to Jen about, right? We could still have a one-on-one, and that's what I think is really important about the program and why it's successful, because it's not just launching you from one-on-one into a group environment. It's a blend, and it's a supportive blend, and it's a very invitational blend, I have to say. Yeah, yeah, I don't want, I guess I lost, that's kind of where I was going with it, just the idea. I can't say enough about what repair's done for me as far as that idea of yeah, I guess I could say this to someone watching because we're graduates of repair. Jess is right. Amanda, you have not done repair, you know, but yeah, it's because of the yeah, the format of it. Being in because it's not really a discussion group or anything. It's not a support group. It's not a discussion at all. It's more, it's learning practices, experiencing them, and talking about the practice. So we never really talk about what your trauma, you know, I've thought about this. In the program, never talked about in a group what caused me trauma. It's not that it's not positive psychology or anything like that. It's just, it doesn't, it's not, I don't know what happens, Jen? Well, how is that possible? No one feels like they need to talk about what happened to them, or what, can you talk a little bit about that as my coach? I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leanna. And I think one of the things you're pointing to is sort of a distinction between like coaching and therapy, right? Whereas in therapy, we may go and talk about our actual traumas and process that and do trauma work with therapists. But in our coaching program in repair, we're really just bringing in supportive practices that we can do together to facilitate co-regulation, and that we can then take home and do on our own for self-regulation. And so we're building a community that we can practice healing skills in, the kind of skills that we can do on our own at home too. And that also we're staying in the present moment. So, you know, we do a practice together in the group, and then we maybe go into a breakout room, or we stay in the group and we discuss, how was that practice for you? Sometimes it's something like a grounding practice. Sometimes it's a guided meditation. Sometimes it's an art activity, but we're staying in the moment of like noticing what's happening as we engage with it, which is a little more on the coaching side, a little more building competencies in resilience and awareness and mindfulness, as opposed to some trauma healing work that would happen in therapy, which is a wonderful complement. A lot of people do both coaching and therapy. Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you guys all for sharing. And I kind of wanted to start wrapping up because we're getting a little bit close to time. I know we're not too far. We have a little bit of time, but I figured we're going to go into the heavy explanation. I want to make sure we have enough time. Thank you all for being here again and sharing your vast knowledge wells with everyone. I kind of wanted to ask, like, what is a safety practice that you guys all use that maybe others can take from? I can go first. Haven't thought about it. For me, a safety practice that I use is I give myself hugs. I hug myself. I'll just like sit down and then hug myself and be like, I am here. I am whole. I am safe. everything is okay, nothing is going too crazy right now. Like, the world is not ending, it's okay. I'm okay to not be okay, and it is okay. I use the word okay a lot. Because I think for me, that's like a way of self-soothing and a way of reestablishing that I am safe in my body and whole. So that's kind of what I use.
I could say for me, and thank you for sharing that, Jess, a lot of compassion, a lot of act work, having check-ins, but also the language is really important to me. So it's a lot of, like you, a lot of it's okay. I think what pops up for me is I tend to be an overachiever, and I'm very, very, very hard on myself. I think many of us are, but I know for particularly me, I can be very hard on myself. And so if I didn't get a task done, or I didn't get something done, or I had to say something that really upset somebody because I had to set a boundary, whatever it may be, and then I start to feel like I need to check in, or like, hey, is this okay? I do a lot of internal talk around, hey, it's okay, and you needed to say what you needed to say, that's what works for you. And if this doesn't work for you, or you didn't get this done today, or you let somebody down, that's okay. That's where you're at right now. That's the choice you made because you needed it. And it's okay. It's all right. And so just a lot of like internal self-compassion, right? Yeah, all the time, a lot of compassion. So
I'll go. I think for me, what works, because I'm in my head so much, a lot, enough. I don't know where I learned this, maybe a somatic instructor, but I've been doing this for a long time. Is I use my vision, and I use it I think about peripheral vision. And there's a billion ways to kind of do this, but you can look at a point, look at the point, and look at the point, and notice everything around you without taking your eyes off of it. And what it does is it opens up your world. And I know that sounds very corny, but for me, it's a visceral thing. It's my body, my arms get flowy. I'm not tight. I'm not that stiff person I was describing walking down the street, because I'm not just looking forward. I'm not down like this. I'm out here, and it just I suggest that people try it. And seriously, look at something, stare at it until you're blue in the face, and just keep look and notice what's around, on top, below, side to side, even behind your ears if you can. And then feel yourself, feel your body. To me, that, like I said, I don't know where I got that years, 5-10 years ago, but it really makes me, it helps me. And it gets me out of my head too, because something physical is always going to be better for someone like me.
Those are all great ones. I think I have a lot of different practices that I use to sort of find my way back to calm and safety when I'm not there. And it depends kind of on where I am, like in my state, right? If I'm very activated and I'm up in fight or flight, what I'm going to do is going to be different than if I'm sort of lower in a collapsed state. And so I think maybe the thing I could say overall is like checking in and knowing like, where am I right now? And the responsiveness of meeting whatever needs arising. So I think turning inward, checking in, and really checking in with what's needed in this moment, and knowing that that's going to be different in different moments depending on where I am in that particular moment.